Good luck, guys.
Hit
It'll be great.
record. Put on tracks. And we're ready in 5, 4, 3.
Hi there, everybody. I'm Brian Smithers. I'm the Program Director of Audio Production, and welcome to this month's Audio Production Town Hall. We're very excited to welcome a graduate of Full Sail here, a woman named Stephanie Rendell, who graduated Recording Arts in 2016-ish, and is manager and head engineer at Real Feel Recording here in Orlando. We want to remind you before we get into our conversation that the Audio Production Town Hall happens once a month, usually at the beginning of week 4. And the idea is for us to get a chance to get together independent of our classes, or whether you're at the beginning or the middle or the end of the program, and talk about the sort of things that audio nerds talk about whenever we have 5 minutes to spare. So on any given month we'll talk about careers, mixing, sound design, new software. We occasionally bring in guests from different manufacturers and software vendors to talk about what's new and exciting. So keep track, subscribe, and keep an eye out for us on FS1. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce you to our guest, Stephanie Rendell. Stephanie, welcome.
Hello, how's it going?
It's going great. Are you doing okay today?
I'm good, thank you for having me.
We're glad you could join us. Would you tell all of our audio production students just a little bit about yourself and what you're doing, and we'll get into the specifics as we go.
Yeah, definitely. You kind of hit the basics. I started here in the RA program the beginning of 2015, so I graduated September of 2016. And before I had even started here, I did start an internship at a local recording studio, which is actually where I work now. So it's kind of a crazy full circle thing, but yeah, so I do recording and mixing there. I also manage the place with my partner, and it's been a fun ride.
That's awesome. Great. Well, congratulations on your success. We're really proud of you. So you said that you started here in 2015, but you transferred into Full Sail, is that right?
Yes, I was going to Stetson University, which is about 45 minutes north of here. I went there for 2.5 years before I started here, and I went in there kind of undecided. I didn't do audio or anything before this, and yeah, I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life. I was just a jock, so I was playing lacrosse. I was on the Division I team. And eventually, I decided to just take this digital audio class, and I almost failed. Like, I was so bad at it. We had like one project that we had to do in Pro Tools and one project in Logic, and I couldn't understand the programs. None of it made sense to me, and I really got obsessed with it. So that summer, I went home, which I'm from Orlando, so it was here, and just emailed a bunch of local studios, and I was like, hey, I have nothing to offer you, but can I intern? Can I learn? Can I clean? Can I be around? Can I figure out what there is to do? What jobs are available? How everything works? And only one place got back to me, and it was Real Feel Recording. And the owner's Nick, and he was just a really cool guy. He was like, hey, no worries, just come on in, and we'll show you around. We'll teach you about how things go here. And the rest just kind of fell into place. I just changed my whole life, and now I'm here.
That's awesome. That's exciting. Well, you've hit on so many points that I think are important for our active students to understand and think about how it applies to their student career and their career aspirations as well. You said that you found one studio that responded to you with regard to an internship, and you're now the manager of that studio.
Yeah.
All right.
There's a couple steps in between there, but yeah.
But that's the interesting thing, is that there are steps in between, one of which is actually building relationships.
Yeah, for sure.
Which wasn't easy at first, because you were telling me earlier that that studio actually went through multiple management changes.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And how did you approach that in terms of trying to, let's see, I thought I was nurturing this relationship, now I need to move on to a new relationship. How do you approach that without getting discouraged?
Yeah, I mean, luckily, I think I was very tenacious at the time. Kind of, I was young and definitely naive, but I think it ended up being a strength at the time. But yeah, I just kept coming back as long as they would allow me to come back. So even if I had to start over, I was like, well, I still don't know anything, so it's fine. Like, I'll start over. I'll be patient about it. I eventually did get, like, when I was at school, I got hired on to do like office work, and so I was like part-time office. I was like hourly, and then like a Studio B engineer. So it was like kind of a junior engineer type thing where it was like $8 an hour. Like, it wasn't very much, but I was like running sessions. It was my first time really like working with clients and like building up how to like run sessions, and because that's a whole thing in itself, like psychology-wise. But yeah, it was really just persevering and just not ever leaving and being annoying. But I was annoying, but I was like really quiet. Like, I didn't talk at all because I was like, I have nothing like to add because I didn't know anything. So I just like was very observant and tried to like do the helpful things that like I could see needed to be done that weren't necessarily like, oh, I can tune these vocals or edit these drums, because I couldn't, but I could like clean better than everyone else, and I could, you know, anticipate people's needs and that type of thing. So they kept me around until I was helpful in other areas, I guess.
You know, I could spin almost every sentence you've said today into a chapter in a book on how to get started in the industry.
Yeah.
Because you've talked about so many cool things. For example, I'll try to tick them off over the next 10 minutes. Being naive. I'm sure you've heard the statement that, you know, little kids do amazing things because they don't know it's impossible, right?
True.
Your naivete actually served you well because you just kept coming at it. You kept trying again and trying to learn the next thing. And so that no doubt helped you.
Definitely. Like, being on the other side of it now, like, I had no idea how hard it was to even like get an internship around here. And like, that's something that we actually work really hard on now, is like, we created like a really intense intern program that we can actually like push people through, and at the end of it, like, they're qualified to run sessions at our studio and stuff like that. Because before it was just like, you know, most studios you're just there and you clean forever, and there's not really any like, you know, hierarchy of like where you can grow and where you have opportunities. So we tried to like kind of fix that a little bit.
That's cool. Good for you to be able to turn your experience into opportunities for the studio to have some growth. That must be why they found you valuable. So you also said that you were very quiet. You didn't get in the way, which also is something that after you spend a great deal of energy trying to learn a discipline, you want to be able to do things and say things and have an opinion, but you have to be basically useful and not heard in the early stages of your career.
Definitely. Yeah, when there's an engineer in the room, they really don't care what you think, you know? And even like, if an artist is there, even if they do ask you, like if you're the intern in the room or whatever, if they ask you what you think, you're like, I think what the engineer thinks, you know? Like, there's kind of like a trust there where you have to like ensure that your artist trusts your engineer. So like, if you're gonna disagree with them, like, it kind of undermines their authority, and then like it gets weird, you know? Because it really should just be between the engineer and the artist. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the mistakes that people make is just like trying to be too helpful in that sense, where if like someone's like, oh, like, I haven't really found a beat for this, or I need production or something. If you're the intern, don't say you're a producer. Like, I mean, there might be opportunities for it, but like if you're just like there to learn, like you're there to learn. You're
Right.
you're an intern. Like you're not, you know, this guy the producer or anything like that. You don't have like an identity at all. You just
Right.
kind of like, my job here is to learn, to assist the engineer, like to make sure everything runs smoothly. So, yeah. Other people do it differently, but that's kind of how I feel it should go.
Yeah. And now that you're actually training interns, can you pick out a good and or a bad thing that you have observed that you've had to try to either nurture in someone or, you know, guide them away from?
The biggest thing would be like, I guess there's two like major things. One would be like ego. Like, I don't need you to teach me about my equipment. Like, I bought it. I set this room up. I rewired it 3 times. I don't need to know that you know what a D-box does. It's like, it's good that you do, but cool, you know? Some people come in there trying to prove their knowledge like a lot, and it's great that you're trying to prove your knowledge, but a lot of times it comes off the wrong way. And I guess the other thing is just not being aware and observant, because as an engineer, like if I'm running a session, I don't really need anybody there. Like, I've run hundreds of sessions. I know to get people water. I know how to control the mood of the session and everything. So, like, if an intern asks me if I need anything, I'm gonna be like, no, I'm good. Like, I'm fine. You're bothering me by asking me. So if you're observant and you can see, like, maybe there's a take where the artist is like, or like their voice is breaking a lot or something, you know, you can just go grab a water real quick. You don't have to be like, oh, like, do you think they need water? Like, just like stuff like that. But just being aware of like what's going on in the room and anticipating someone needing something is like way more helpful than just at the end of the session when I'm cleaning up, I'm putting stuff away, they're like, oh, do you need anything? So, yeah, it's like some people like kind of naturally have that, and other people like have to learn that, but it's definitely an important thing to learn.
No doubt. I like what you said about ego, because as my first career is as a musician, as a performing and recording musician, and like an engineer, you need to be confident enough in yourself to be able to say, yes, I can do that, and then do it without second guessing yourself. So you've got to have enough ego to put yourself out there and to, you know, in the one case, stand on stage, in the other case, stand between the artist and the A&R person, or the artist and their, you know, significant other, and actually do the things that are necessary, and that takes ego.
For sure.
But it has to be moderated, and it has to be brought out at the appropriate time.
Definitely, all kind of like in its proper place, because even like one of the stages of our internship is when like I'll still be in the session with an intern, but I'll throw them on the board, and that they'll be running the session, but I'll be talking to the artist and kind of like making sure everything's running smoothly. So like within my conversation with the artist, that he or she can tell what I want them to do. So if they're paying attention, they'll be like, okay, record. And I won't have to turn off the mic and be like, okay, record now.
Right.
But in situations like that, they have to be confident in their skills, and they have to like understand that they're like at the stage where they're becoming the engineer. So they need to be able to be like, you know, decisive and help me maybe make decisions about like, oh, that take wasn't good, or this take, you know, they could do better. So I think it should, like, your ego in that sense should grow over time, but it should just always be kind of in line with your position, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And even when you're the chief engineer, your ego has to be subservient to the needs of the client.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in the sense of that, like, I have like literally like zero ego, but that's just me. But I learn from my interns all the time. Like, there's always like little things that I could be faster at, or like a shortcut to like put stuff down in a playlist that like I forgot because I just don't do it a lot. And I'll watch somebody do it and I'm like, oh wait, what did you just do? And you know, I really like having other people around for that because like kind of keeps me on my toes, and I like learning from my interns. But yeah, there's just always more stuff to learn, which is cool.
Yeah, there sure is. So I want to go back to your transfer from Stetson to Full Sail.
Mm-hmm.
I know the program at Stetson. It's a very cool program, but it's focused way differently than Full Sail's.
Definitely.
Yeah, the digital arts program there is more of an academic, multimedia sort of environment where they're doing more experimental composition and
sure.
you know, electronic manipulation and stuff, which is awesome. But it's not the same thing as the kind of, you know, commercial production that we tend to focus on here.
Definitely. That was one of the reasons where like I found like I kind of peaked like early there, because I was like, oh, well, I'm learning this other stuff in my internship, and I'm trying to figure out how to make a pop vocal sound, and I'm trying to figure out like how to build out a studio and this type of stuff. And we were just like listening to Brian Eno tracks and like critiquing them, and I was like, this is not what I want to do. But it was still like audio, it was still digital audio and everything, so it was like very interesting that I could see how different like the education needed to be for me, because I was just like, I just want to do music. Like I want to work in a studio. That's it. Like I already know. So like if this isn't going to do that, let me transition to something that will. And the engineer that was the head engineer at Realfield before me really convinced me, like, because he saw my progress over time, because I kept going back in my internship, and he was just like, you're not really learning the right stuff. Like if you really want to be successful, if you want to catch up to all these people who started doing this stuff at 12 and you're like already 21, you know, you really need to like just go to Full Sail. And it was a hard decision to make because I was having a lot of fun, you know, I was, you know, living my life, and it was a really hard transition, but it was super worth it to me, because if I had stayed at Stetson, it just would have been a waste of the last year and a half that I was there, as much as I loved it. But it kind of makes me feel like I just was able to start like my career like a year and a half earlier than if I had just stayed and then done Full Sail and then like gone through that whole thing. So yeah,
That's had to have been a tough decision to make.
it was really hard. My family was not about it, but they, you know, they were like, they're your loans, so basically. But they were supportive as much as they could, because they didn't understand it, you know. But yeah, they were definitely skeptical of the whole thing.
I think a lot of us struggle to make our families understand what it is that we're trying to do and how to go about it.
On a daily basis, I still struggle to have them understand what I do, like regularly, because yeah, none of my family's in music at all. So everybody's like, why are you always working and never get paid? And I'm like, I don't know how to explain this, but yeah.
So when you started at Full Sail, you had the experience of about a year and a half of technical courses at Stetson, but not really a whole lot of core recording and music training. Is that right?
Definitely, yeah.
Okay. I think that's another experience that a lot of our students have when they come to Full Sail, is that they've got this interest, something has ignited the fire for them. But like I started playing saxophone when I was in 4th grade. Yeah. And I started playing flute when I was in 10th grade, and clarinet and so anyways, you know, and a lot of people catch fire and find this interest later and arrive here without technical background. They're not the ones who've been doing it in their bedroom since they're 12 that engineer was referring to you. So tell me a little bit about the experience of starting from relatively zero and how you managed to find your way to ramp it up in time to really be viable professionally.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest, like, I guess the biggest thing that helped me learn quickly, like super quickly, was like after, I think it was about the first like 5 or 6 months that I was at Full Sail, we were doing like, you know, kind of the generic classes and just getting into like what audio was and everything. I ended up moving closer to here and closer to my internship, like across the street. And so every day I would be like going to school, and then we would have like a couple hours of a break between classes or whatever, and I would drive to the studio and I'd be like, hey Will, the engineer, I'd be like, hey Will, like this is what I learned today, and he'd be like, nah, this is this, and like this is what's important to learn, and this is what's like a core thing that you need to figure out how to, you know, this is like a theoretical thing that in life you have to learn when to break these rules and stuff like that. And like having the technical education and then like the in the real world thing happening at the same time was like so crazy, because I was able to like really focus on what was important, and some of the things that like maybe weren't going to be as relevant to me specifically or what I wanted to do, like game audio. I couldn't tell you anything about it now, but that's because I don't do it and I never had like a huge interest in it. But you know, it was fun like at the time, but I knew that I didn't want to do audio posts. I knew that I didn't want to do game audio. So like during those months, I just kind of coasted through, but then was like heavy on my internship and like, you know, going in every day trying to record drums and stuff like that. So just being able to compare like the school education and like what I was being taught in my internship at the same time was like, just made me like grow so quickly.
That's cool.
Yeah, I'm also a nerd, so I was just like reading like all the time, like reading all the information that we had, and I would read like manuals a lot and stuff like that, just to like try to absorb as much as I could.
That's awesome. I want to ask you more about that in a second, but let's define coasting through with regard to courses like game audio and audio post.
Don't coast through.
Well, I appreciate your honesty about that, but there's coasting through and there's ignoring.
Yeah.
And when you say coasted through, you meant you...
I mean, I think I still got A's.
You did the work, and you got there. You got A's. You didn't blow them off.
Yeah.
You just weren't as enthralled with them and over the top about them as you were, like, you know, studio
I knew I was going to
recording
get through it and probably forget a lot of it, if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, we all forget what we don't do on the gig on a regular basis. I mean, as a musician, if I have a gig playing saxophone for 8 months and I'm not playing clarinet that much, my clarinet chops suffer. It happens to all of us.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, okay, thank you for clearing what coasting by means, because that's an important lesson.
To be fair, I didn't let any grades slip or anything. I always did the work, and I always learned what I needed to learn. But, you know, in the back of my mind, I was like, this isn't going to be as important in my career or whatever. So.
Gotcha. So you were in between classes, or at least concurrently with classes, you were talking to your mentor and trying to put what you were learning in context. You were reading books and manuals. So you didn't just leave it at the classroom door.
Definitely not. I don't think anybody who did the bare minimum in my class is working on audio right now. Like, I might be the only one. There might be like 2. So yeah, you really have to go above and beyond, especially if you go in with like a smaller amount of, you know, knowledge beforehand. Like, Full Sail just gives you a really good base of information, but like, you have to practice like all the time. And that was one, who was it? I don't think he works here anymore, but Dennis. I had Dennis for
Advanced Audio Workstations.
Advanced Audio Workstations. Yeah. And
he's here.
like, he's still here?
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
But we were like super tight, and he said one thing to me that like I remember to this day, which was use Pro Tools every day. Like, super simple, but use Pro Tools every day, and I did. And now I'm like the fastest person I know at Pro Tools. So yeah, you just have to practice. Like, there's no way around it. So I practiced all the time, as much as I could.
That's important. We were talking before broadcast about the fact that you're an athlete, so you're used to practice. I'm a musician,
Yes.
so I'm used to practice. You can't do what we do as an athlete and as a musician without practice, and you can't be an engineer without that same practice. It manifests itself in a little bit different way, but that ongoing practice makes all the difference when you're under pressure.
Definitely. Yeah, I can definitely attest to that, because there was like, I would say last summer, like middle of the pandemic, all of the studios in LA were closed and everything. And I think even the ones in like Orange County were closed, but technically our studio's in Seminole County, so we were like kind of open. But there was an artist that came down from California, because this is his hometown. His name is Tyler Yahweh. And he ended up booking a session with me, because it was kind of like, it was the studio that when he was a kid, he would go by and he would be like, yo, when I make it one day, like, I'm going to record here. And that was long before I was an intern or anything, so I didn't know him. But he ended up booking a session with me, and like, he loved working with me. He had never worked with really anybody in Orlando for like years and years, but he started working with me, and he really enjoyed it, because like, when it came down to it, when the time was there, I was fast and I adapted to his style of recording, and he had a really good time. So he ended up coming there all summer. We were in sessions from like 9 p.m. to like 5 a.m. every day. And it was definitely a trying time, but it was super fun. And it was like the first and pretty much only like label artist I've worked with yet, but he was like just really impressed with me. And you know, when people like you, they talk all kinds of crazy stuff about like, oh, he's like, I want to take you on tour with me, I want to bring you to LA, I want to do this, do that. First of all, don't ever let your head get big about stuff like that, because it doesn't happen. But it's just like really, I guess, rewarding to know that like all that work is paid off. And that sometimes I wonder, like, you know, if like being in a small place like Orlando, I'm like kind of, if I'm not as good as engineers in bigger music cities like LA or whatever, because like I'm in a smaller place with a smaller, like, you know, pool of artists and stuff. But like hearing from someone that was out of town that, you know, like I was as good as his engineers back home, I was like, okay, so I'm like, I'm really out here, like.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a pretty rewarding experience. It was cool.
That's awesome. Congratulations. That's pretty exciting. Has that album been released?
He released one song that I recorded a feature on, but nothing else has been released from that. That's just how it goes. We literally recorded like hundreds of songs, but he hasn't released an album yet, which I think is coming soon. But yeah, you just never know.
Yeah.
I think he might have just been down here like having fun type of thing. So, you know, it was fun.
But you never know. If there's that many songs, something's bound to come of some of it at some point.
Yeah, definitely.
So.
He showed me some of the features he has on there, and they're crazy. He has some like really big name features on it.
That's very cool. So you brought up an interesting thing, working with him, but that's not your typical client here at Real Feel these days, right?
No, I mean, aside from him, every artist we've ever had has pretty much been completely independent, like self-funded, you know, just your regular person. And I think it's really fun to work with them, but there's some challenges that come with it too. Like a lot of them just don't really know a lot about the process of releasing music and promoting yourself and stuff like that. So even if we come up with like a crazy song that, like, you know, people would argue could be on the charts or whatever, like, you know, if only their friends hear it, you know, it doesn't go anywhere. So yeah, sometimes it gets like tough with that, but I don't know. We're working with some people around here to try to build up Orlando a little more and get more reach, and that type of thing. So hopefully it'll turn around here soon.
Awesome. And you've been actually managing the studio since when?
Yes. After I graduated, I left Real Feel and attempted to start another studio, and it didn't go very well. So after a year, I left that, and by that time, Real Feel didn't have anyone. And I came kind of crawling back, like, hey, like, do you need me? And that was when I started managing with the main producer there, Phil. And yeah, we basically took it over. At that point, there was not really any business because they had kind of not really been doing anything for a while, had like management issues. And so we kind of had to start from scratch. And that was like the end of 2017. Like November 2017, so essentially 2018. But yeah, it was basically just the two of us in there, like just emailing people, reaching out to everybody we could, like, hey, come record. And at that point, like, I was essentially like fresh out of Full Sail, like essentially. I had like one project under my belt that I had really like engineered from the ground up. So I shouldn't have been there, like, in all honesty. But like he gave me a chance, and I was like, I'm gonna do my best. We're gonna do this thing, and yeah, a lot of it has just been me like growing from there and learning from the producers I'm working with, learning from the artists I'm working with, and we all kind of are growing together.
That's cool. So you've been not only growing your skills and reputation as an engineer, but also growing the business of the studio at the same time, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot to have on your shoulders.
I mean, it's got to get done. I'm not trying to get a day job.
That's great. Well, to me, and not to beat on the point too hard, but this to me is exciting. It's got to be exciting and inspiring to our audio production students who are spread all over the country and some even internationally.
For sure.
They're not all growing up in LA. They're not all growing up in New York or Nashville. And there is work to be done. People who need to be recorded, people who need to make records that might or might not ever go anywhere, all over the country, all over the world.
Definitely.
And you have a studio that is actually a viable entity serving that client. And at the same time, you have developed a facility and your own skill set to the point where when a major label artist comes to you and says, let's give this a shot, they're genuinely impressed with you and pleased with what you can do because you do hold up well to the LA engineering talent.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think like starting to work with more people that are from LA, because I do like a lot of stuff remotely too. Yeah, I think a lot of people get a weird idea about LA engineers, and they hear like, oh, it's an engineer from LA, so they like must be like, you know, a certain amount of good. But I think with anywhere, you're gonna find engineers that are, you know, less experienced, that are, you know, making easy mistakes and stuff like that. So I feel like you shouldn't really compare yourself. Like, I just try to be a better engineer than I was, you know, yesterday and last year, and just make sure that, like, you know, if I do compare myself, it's like to Jason Joshua. So it's not like, you know, to some dude from LA or whatever, but it's to people that I actually like idolize and inspire to like be like.
That's awesome. Be better than you were yesterday and than you were last year is kind of that's a life mission.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a life well lived right there.
I've gone in. I often listen back to like some of my old mixes, and sometimes I'll be like, okay, like you did all right, and other times I'll be like, oh my gosh, like, you know, the artist approved of this, and it'll be like, you know, from 2018 or something, and I'm like, you know what, I was such a noob back then, and I'm sure like sometime in the future I'll be thinking about my mixes now and like, oh, I was such a noob back then. But it's like, it's really cool to like see the progress, and I see my mixes like getting louder as well, because like in probably like 2018, 2019, everyone was like, oh, like you have to master everything to -14 loops. So I was like, okay, that's what we're doing. And then like over time, the big engineers are like moving away from it, and so I did as well. And now I'm like, oh, all my mixes are like super loud now. But it's just really cool to compare like different things like that, and those things are always changing. Like even within the industry, like different sounds are popular like one year, and then like all of a sudden everybody's vocals are dry, and then all of a sudden like, you know, everybody's overcompressed and bright, and then everybody's like, you know, super mid-rangey. So yeah, it's fun to like try to stay on top of things in that sense.
Right, always growing, always changing.
Yeah.
So if anybody has questions for Stephanie, feel free to type them into the chat, and we'll be happy to get to them as we go. We've got about another 10 minutes of her time here, so get those questions in, and we will field them as they come up. So in the meantime, so you said earlier one of the biggest skills that you've had to develop, aside from all the technical knowledge, is the ability to actually run a session.
Oh yeah.
So you've got to be, you know, what, psychologist, shoulder to cry on, taskmaster.
I mean, yeah, you had to be a little bit of everything, and that was not easy for me to learn because, like, I'm an introvert. Like, I don't do well with a lot of people in the room. I don't do well with people looking at me or anything like that. So it took a long time to figure out how to run a session like my way, like what my personality was as an engineer, because everybody comes in and they need something different from you. So some people really want you to be like hype about their music, and then other people it's their first time recording and they're super nervous, and you have to just like be really like gentle with them and encouraging. Some people will absolutely shut down if you say that they could do better, and some people want every single line critiqued, like, you know, intensely. So it takes just running like hundreds of sessions and being bad at it and figuring out different ways to tell people that something wasn't good, like figuring out how to critique people's voices in a way that they can understand. Like, yeah, it's a huge learning experience, and a lot of times you just have to be there for people to let their emotions out. And like I've had like rappers just like crying, like recording songs and stuff, because they're just like, it's like heavy emotion that they're dealing with. And if I was somebody that was maybe like judgmental or didn't make them feel comfortable, then I wouldn't have gotten that performance out of them. So like it's just really important to, like, I would say that's 80% of being a good engineer, like recording wise, is just like making people feel comfortable, making them feel like they can do their best, and kind of pushing them to do that, because I mean, otherwise you're a button pusher and nobody wants that.
Yeah. Well, I love your empathy and your adaptability, because you never know who it is that you're going to be dealing with, what they're going to be going through, what they're trying to get out of a particular session.
Yeah.
And listening to that is important. I find it funny that you describe yourself as an introvert when I happen to know that you were a Division I athlete.
Yeah.
And you say you don't like to be in front of people, and yet you went out in the middle of a stadium with everybody watching you, and we're okay with that.
I mean, to be fair, not many people watch women's lacrosse. But, so it was really just our parents.
But you are still the center of attention.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess that never really bothered me. I was more like, I was a very aggressive player, so I really just wanted to beat people up, kind of.
That's awesome. I actually consider myself an introvert as well, but because of what I do as a musician, as an engineer, as a teacher, no one I know understands that that's who I who I feel like. So
Yeah, for sure.
I get it.
Yeah.
I understand.
Like after this, I just won't talk to anybody for a couple of days so I can like recoup.
That's great. Well, we appreciate you taking the time to come talk to us.
Sure.
So the other thing that I kind of wanted to hit with you is how did you mentally and practically go about making the transition from the mindset of being a student to the mindset of actually putting food on your table, doing what you study?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that I ever really got out of the mentality of being a student, because I think it's really important to know that like you need to keep learning. Like I try to like, I have it like as a task where I need to like watch a tutorial like every day, and that's something that I think is really important, to just like always keep learning no matter what. So but to transition into like making money is definitely tough. I think I started it a little bit when I was in school still, and I was in a very good environment that helped me learn, and I wasn't just like doing it on my own. So like, because when I was working at Real Feel and in school, I was like a Studio B engineer. So when people called and booked that studio, I was one of the engineers that they could be with. And that was kind of my first taste of like making money, recording and stuff like that. And when I left Real Feel, you know, I really thought I was like the bee's knees. That was like when I graduated. I was like kind of on my high horse, like, all right, I'm bigger than this place. I'm better than all this. And that was when I started the other studio with my mentor at the time. And I had to shift gears. Like the way we structured the business was like everybody was gonna do what was best for the business. So I was obviously not gonna engineer because there was already a head engineer. So I was like kind of behind the scenes, like, you know, booking, running the business, trying to make money. And we were starting from scratch in like a giant building. So it was really tough. And that whole year, I only engineered one project, which is why I was saying before, I only had like one project under my belt when I started Real Feel back up. So yeah, it was like just a really rude awakening when we started Real Feel back up and people were like coming in, because I was like, oh, we're running sessions? Okay, I had to remember how to do this. Like it was a lot of like fake it till you make it type thing. I mean, I had the core skills that I needed, but I was still developing a lot about like, you know, the way I personally engineered, and like developing like my own templates and how I wanted even people's raws to sound. Like if I wanted them leaving the studio sounding a certain way, that they could like release it even though I don't want them to. But like, you know, just kind of figuring out how I was gonna go through all of that. But yeah, I was essentially managing the studio like right away, and we weren't really making any money, but I was figuring it out. And eventually over time we started to make money. So
Cool. So there's your answer got on a lot of really great points. A couple of them I want to kind of highlight are, I'll get to that in a second, but we actually have a question coming in. So what's our question?
Should. You guys hearing me up there?
Yes.
All right, so we have from Dumbledore, he has two questions. What was the hardest part of the transition between schools? And what was the most interesting thing you learned at Full Sail?
Okay. The hardest thing about transition between schools was my lifestyle and my friends. I think like I touched on earlier, when I moved back here, I was still going to Stetson every weekend, because I was like, this is where my friends are, this is where I like to hang out. And it really took a couple months and my mom telling me to, you know, move on with my life, that, you know, I really started to get more into Full Sail and meeting my group of friends here and everything. But it was that, and then like when we got into like more of like the audio content versus like the gen ed stuff that
Right.
I kind of got more intertwined with the school. What was the other question?
The most interesting thing you remember learning at Full Sail?
Most interesting thing. Oh gosh. I don't know. I was like such a noob when I got here that everything was kind of mind-blowing. So like maybe like ADR. Learning about that in audio post, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Like my whole life is a lie? Everything I've ever watched has been re-recorded? Like that was really crazy to me. But
Yeah, only like 85% a lie.
yeah.
The other 15% is actually production dialogue.
But yeah, that was so wild to me. So there were a lot of things in like audio posts that were like fun to learn about, even though I was like, I'm not doing this with my life. But yeah, I would say that was the most interesting thing. But probably the most important thing, engineer-wise, was use Pro Tools every day. Like,
Thank you,
hands down.
Dennis.
Yes, thank you, Dennis.
That's great. Good questions. Do we have any other questions? Don't seem to have any other questions at this time, and we need to find a way to wrap this up. And you've given us so much great stuff to think about.
Thank you.
I guess my final question to you is: you said that you have a task for yourself to check out at least one tutorial every day. Can you name one or a couple of your favorite sources for interesting tutorials?
My biggest go-to is definitely Mixed with the Masters. I think it's amazing, like that they've actually gotten the content that they've gotten on there, and I've learned a lot from it. I've like rebuilt certain people's templates and like tried to use it. I mean, I don't have all the UAD plugins, but you know, I'll like, you know, modify them and, you know, see how they produce certain sounds and stuff like that. So that's like a super valuable resource. But other than that, like just stuff on YouTube, stuff I'll see on Instagram where it's just like, oh, look at this cool trick, and then I'll just try it, you know. I like just save them all. Like I have a folder of just like little tutorial things. Whenever I'm bored, I'll just like go and make it and be like, oh, okay, cool. I'm never going to use that, but at least I know how to do it. But yeah.
So you not only watch the tutorial, you then go and actually try to do it.
For sure. Like there were times where I was like, oh, I can just like watch this thing at home or whatever, but it never sunk in unless I like did it and heard for myself like what it did. So over time I kind of made sure that the time that I watched the tutorial was like time I set aside at the studio to be like, all right, cool, I'm gonna set up a little session, try it in here. Or a lot of times it'll be like during a mix, I'll be like, oh, like there was this one thing that I thought of that I'm not quite sure how to do, but you know, I saw the title of a video for it once. So when I'm mixing this song, let me go to that video and try it out. And sometimes I'll use it, sometimes I won't. Sometimes it'll go in my template because it's amazing and I love it. Yeah. But yeah, it's a fun process.
That's cool. That is a great process, and you just keep learning and getting better and growing all the time. Stephanie, thank you so much for coming and talking with us today. It's been a great pleasure chatting with you.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Super. Appreciate it. So thank you for joining us for this month's Audio Production Town Hall. We want to thank Stephanie Rendell of Real Feel Recording for joining us and sharing her experience and background with us. And I want to remind you that the Audio Production Town Hall is a monthly production, and we'd like to thank the Audiovisual Technologies class for providing production for this from month to month. It's always a great pleasure working with these show production students, and we wouldn't be the same without you. Thanks very much, everybody, and take care.